My name is Megan. I'm the Aging Services Coordinator over at Alexandra House. I've been there for almost 2 years now, and prior to that I've worked in the domestic violence, sexual violence world for about 7 years. I've been coming here since I've started to have office hours here at the Fridley Senior Center. I come the first Wednesday of every month from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock, and my office hours are right by Connie's office there. So anytime you guys want to come in, talk about maybe a friend of yours who's having issues that you'd like to help, or talk about any issues that you might be having, whatever it may be, come talk to me. Something your daughter's having, go ahead and come in and talk to me. I'm open to talk about anything. Keep me busy. No, I'm just kidding. So how many of you have heard of the Alexandra House? All of you but you? You haven't heard of us?
No.
Okay.
Not until I saw the write-up on the
Good. So the Alexandra House, do you live in Fridley?
I live in Wilfull, actually.
Oh, okay, so you still live around here. So we're located in Blaine, our shelter is. It's been around since the early 80s, late 70s. I can't remember the exact year. And it started out as just an emergency shelter for women and children who are experiencing domestic or sexual violence. We've grown over the years, and now we're a shelter. We have our youth services program that goes in the schools, the high schools in the county, to talk about dating violence, violence prevention, domestic violence within the home, to help those kids out who might be experiencing it, or again, just to prevent it. We have our legal advocates that are based out of Anoka that will go to court with any clients that we are working with, help file an order for protection or some type of protection order to keep somebody away from them. And then we have my program, which is the Aging Services program, which has been around about 3 years now. And so my program works with individuals that are over the age of 50. And we work with people who are being hurt in any way, whether that is somebody is stealing your money from you, someone is keeping your money from you. Let's say a spouse gets all the money and won't let you have any access to it. Somebody is spending your money on things for themselves. So if they are a power of attorney for you and they are going out and they're buying themselves a new car instead of spending it on assisted living if that's what's needed. We help people who are being physically harmed, whether that is purposeful punching, hitting, kicking, or it's physically harmed by means of neglect, where somebody is supposed to be your caregiver and they are neglecting you, and by that means you're becoming physically harmed, whether that's bed sores or whatever that may be. Refusing to give you your medication when they're supposed to help you with that, refusing to get medication for you if that's part of their job as a caregiver. Also spiritual neglect. So let's say somebody is supposed to bring you to church every Sunday. Well, that person stops bringing you to church every Sunday. That's a form of abuse. Or let's see here, where else do I want to go with that? Oh, and of course, sexual abuse as well. Or emotional and mental is a huge facet. So you're stupid, you're crazy, you think you remember that something had happened a certain way and they tell you it didn't happen that way, but you're pretty sure that's how it happened. That's called gaslighting or crazy making, to make you feel like you're crazy, but you're really not crazy. A lot of my clients have had their sons or grandsons or daughter, whoever it is, making them think that they might have dementia or Alzheimer's by hiding things from them, hiding assistive devices, and saying, Mom, you left your walker over there. Oh no, I remember I put it right by the closet. No, Mom, it's over there, when really they moved it on you. So it's them making you think that something's wrong with you when there's really nothing wrong with you. So with that, I'll move on here. Does anybody have any questions thus far?
I'm curious, at Alexandra House, do they board people there? Like if an elder is being abused and needs a safe place to go, is that some place that they can go and live it for a while?
Yep, typically people stay with us for 30 to 45 days. So it's very short-term stay. However, a problem that I'm experiencing with my clients is a lot of my clients have Parkinson's disease, or they have some sort of issue where being in a community setting is not appropriate for their needs, or they need help with medication management. Nobody that works at the shelter can help with medication management. You need to be completely functioning on your own in order to stay at our shelter. A lot of our clients can't handle the beds that we have. We have typical shelter beds, and a lot of people need something better for their back, so they don't want to come to shelter because their backs are going to hurt or their hips are going to hurt or whatever it may be. That's something that I see and our program sees lacking in not only Anoka County, not the state of Minnesota, but nationwide. There is no emergency shelter for people to go to when they have ailments like that. There's nowhere for them to go. And so that's been a really stressful situation for a lot of our clients because they're stuck in this abusive situation that they can't really get out of because there's nowhere for them to go. So then it's waiting for medical assistance to come into play to get onto an elderly waiver or a CADI waiver to get into assisted living. So abuse in later life, I kind of talked about it a little bit. The abuse, neglect, or financial exploitation of an older adult that is perpetrated by someone in an ongoing relationship with the victim. You see it can be spouse, family member, partner, or caregiver. Out of all my clients right now, the most by far is daughters that are the abusers. Oh yes, daughters. And after that probably comes grandsons, then sons, and then caregiver. Now, caregiver, when I say caregiver, that means a caregiver that is non-related. A lot of times those daughters are also acting as caregivers. Every single one of my clients is a victim of financial exploitation. Their daughter or whomever is stealing their money, or their daughter or whoever is using that money for their own selves or not paying on their bills like they're supposed to be doing. I have not worked with anybody yet who is a victim of abuse within a nursing home or with a caregiver facility or caregiving facility. One of you mentioned when we were just starting here that there was a situation in Lino Lakes a while ago where a couple people were being abused within the facility by staff members. I did hear about that, and that is true. None of those people I worked with. But I also wanted to mention that somebody had said about how the son wasn't able to get information for multiple weeks. A lot of times, and I'm not saying that's in that situation, but it just brought this up in my head, that if you hear somebody coming to you and saying, you know, my grandpa's in the hospital and I can't get a hold of any information where he is, what hospital he's at, what room he's in, sometimes there's a very good reason for that. I have a client that's in a facility right now. His son cannot know where he is. There's no order for protection because there's multiple reasons for that. But he is not allowed by any means to know where he is. If he calls looking for his father, nobody is going to tell him a thing. And there's very good reasons for that. Because he has severely abused his father. Was supposed to be a caregiver. Any questions so far on that? Are you guys kind of astonished by who the abuser is?
Your daughter is, yeah.
Yep. It's amazing to me as a daughter myself, because I can't picture doing anything to harm my parents. They raised me, they clothed me, they fed me. I think they made me into a pretty good person. I can't imagine it, but it happens quite frequently. So this is discussing the different types of abuse. You see a percentage sign there for the numbers of elders that are abused every year. For these purposes, my purposes, I work for everybody over the age of 50. So under our grant, elder is somebody over the age of 50. For the purposes of these percentages, an elder is considered somebody over the age of 65. So what percentage of elders do you think are abused every year? 65 and older. 10. We'll talk about that later. So what do you think the percentage of elder abuse victims are women?
9 and
You guys are good at that one. Pretty close. 67. How many cases of abuse get reported? One in how many cases of elder abuse?
5%.
1 in 25.
1 in 14. What do you think the median age or the average age is of an elder abuse victim?
80.
Very close. 77.9. So the likelihood of abuse increases with age, which makes sense because the older you get, the more vulnerable you generally become, right? So that percentage, the number of elders that are abused every year. The issue with the reports like these is everything is very underreported. That number is actually, we don't know the number, but it's actually quite a bit higher than that. Part of the issue is well, this is only people over the age of 65. This is done mostly through telephone calls. So calling somebody, asking their age, if they have been a victim of A, B, C, and D. That's assuming A, those people are answering the phones. A lot of times those people are so isolated they're not allowed a phone, or they're not allowed to answer it, or they're probably not going to tell you the right answer if their abuser is listening to them. Also, if there was any sort of dementia, they wouldn't talk to them at all about it because they couldn't count on a correct answer being given. So you just rolled out everybody with any cognitive impairment, which a lot of times, because they are so vulnerable, are often abused. So that doesn't include any of those people.
Megan, are those statistics pretty close to what we have in Anoka County too?
I'm not sure on our statistics on Anoka County. I don't think that anybody has actually done the research for Anoka County. I'm assuming that because it's from Elderly Abuse America, that it would be pretty close. Like I said, I work with people from 50 on up. This was only 65. So my average number of age would probably be quite a bit lower. I have quite a bit of clients that are between the ages of 51 and 62. So, but then not in that age group, I have a ton of clients who are about 84. So we're gonna go through a few things here, and at first they're going to seem pretty, well, duh, that's abuse. So we're gonna go through it. I just want you to say, is it abuse? What kind of abuse is it? Abuse?
Yes.
What kind of abuse?
Absolutely.
Abuse?
Yes.
What kind of abuse?
Emotional.
I would say both as well. It's physical abuse because she's restraining her in a way she shouldn't be restrained. But the way she's yelling at her, I would absolutely say emotional and mental as well. Probably some intimidation going on there too. Abuse?
Yes.
What kind?
Mental.
That could also really be physical too, depending on how loud he's yelling. If somebody's that close to your ear yelling, that's gonna hurt. This. What kind? You guys are so good. Yep. She takes my money. She says she needs it. I'm afraid to say no, but I don't know what to do. So this is a scenario that a lot of clients that I have worked with have faced is their grandchildren or their children are needing money and kind of manipulating into getting them the money. I always tell my clients, they're 43 years old, they've had time, to get themselves on their own feet. If they were 18, it'd be one story. Dad, I need help getting into a place on my own. Can you put the damage deposit down? It's one thing when you're 18, but when you're 43 and you're consistently needing help, that's a problem. They need to be responsible for their own actions and own bad choices in their life. And again, it's one thing if your child is 50 and that you haven't helped them since they were 18 and all of a sudden they're getting a divorce or a midlife crisis and something's going on. That one-time thing isn't abuse. It's the consistent, I need money, I need cigarettes, I need money. It's
or if they're taking it without you.
Absolutely, without your knowledge. What do you think this is?
That's a mess.
Neglect. So this, it could be caregiver neglect, but it could also just be self-neglect. So we don't know the situation here. There's no people here. We don't know if it's somebody living on their own and neglecting their own needs that probably needs some help but just doesn't have any in-home services yet. Or maybe they don't need help and they just don't care. Or maybe it's somebody who has a caregiver and the person who is supposed to be the caregiver is supposed to do the cleaning and they're not. So in this case, it'd be caregiver neglect. So it kind of is twofold there. Sexual violence. The sexual violence isn't talked about very much for a variety of reasons. But sexual violence are situations in which a person is forced, tricked, coerced into doing something that's an unwanted sexual act. Includes contact with elders who are unable to grant access or grant the information to say, yes, this is wanted, or no, this is absolutely not wanted. So it's hands-on offenses, hands-off offenses, harmful genital practices by caregiver. Again, like I said, sexual violence is not talked a lot about in individuals that are over the age of 50. And I think it's from the older generations have learned not to talk about it, not to talk about sex. If something happens, you move on, you let it go. I was trained in 2011 as I started out being a sexual violence advocate. So if people were assaulted, I'd go to the hospitals and I'd meet them there and I'd go through the exams with them. And at that point, the statistic was, this was 7 years ago, that if you are in a room with women who are over the age of 50, half of them have been sexually assaulted in their life. And so it's not talked about nearly enough.
How much is the sexual violence prevalent for elders? I mean, in their lifetime, they might have been sexually
Right.
abused, but does it occur after the age of 50?
Again, that's not something that I have a good number for because those elders still don't talk about it. Out of the cases that I'm aware of, only one person I have met with has been sexually assaulted, and they were sexually assaulted by their grandson. I mean, I've been there almost 2 years, and there's been one instance that I've known of sexual abuse, but that doesn't mean that more isn't happening. Now, I have had a couple clients come to me down the road and say, okay, I'm away from him now. Now I need to tell you 2 years ago or 6 months ago, he raped me, he assaulted me, which that happens frequently too. So the number's higher than just the one, it's just comes out at a different point in time.
What's the follow-up on that then? For rape?
It
Are they
depends.
arrested or are they?
It depends what the client wants to do. If any age of person is sexually assaulted and they want to report it, it goes one way. If they have been sexually assaulted and they don't want to report it, nothing happens. If somebody reports to me that they've been sexually assaulted and they're a vulnerable adult, I have to make that report to Mark and make the mandated report. I'm a mandated reporter for vulnerable adults. However, if they're not a vulnerable adult and they tell me something in confidence, I'm not going to say anything about it. But if they want to make that report can look like if the assault just happened, I can take them to the hospital, or they can go to the hospital and they're going to have a sexual assault nurse examiner, SANE nurse, look at them. They generally do an interview with the individual who was assaulted, and then they do kind of a full body scan of, okay, you just told me the story of what happened. Now we need to look at those parts of your body about what happened. If during the assault somebody scratched their assailant, they're going to take a little Q-tip on your nails and see if they can get any of that DNA. Okay, so in the old days he hit me, but I didn't tell anybody. Now he controls me by taking away my medicine. He says I'm lucky to have him. My guess is there's probably some financial abuse going on in the background too that we don't know about. Just from my experience, everybody I work with has financial abuse going on. So yeah, if somebody's taking away your medication, or if they are refraining from giving you medication that you're supposed to have, that's a form of abuse. Or saying, oh yeah, I'll take you to Walgreens tomorrow to get your medicine, but continually push it off, and it's a medication that you feel that you need or that you actually do need, that's abuse. He controls who I speak to. I don't see my friends and family anymore. He says we don't need them. I feel trapped. There's a lot of reasons as to why people don't leave. We'll go into that a little bit later. It takes generally a woman 1 in 7 times to leave an abuser before they're actually able to do it. And again, that's for a multitude of reasons that we'll go into a little bit later. But so yeah, him snooping through her purse, unless he's asked and she said, yeah, go ahead, get a piece of gum out of my purse. He shouldn't be in her purse. He definitely shouldn't be in her phone unless it's, hey, will you go get Jackie's number out of my phone? He shouldn't be in her phone. Everybody has their right to privacy, no matter if you're married or not. You have a right to your own privacy. You have a right to talk to your friends in private. You have a right to say, oh, my husband is driving me nuts today. I wish he'd just go mow the lawn, or whatever it would be. You have a right to those feelings, and you have a right to be able to have private conversations with those that you want to talk to. You think domestic violence doesn't happen to someone like me. I've covered it up for years. So you can see in this picture, they're a pretty, probably wealthy family, and she's trying to cover up her black eye right here, and he's got his hand on her like he's keeping her in place, and a stern look on his face, like, if you make one move, I'm doing it again. So this is just a picture to depict that we see abuse through all different socioeconomic statuses. It is not the poor, it is not just middle class, it is not upper middle class, it is not high class people, it is everybody in between. And actually, the adults that I've worked with are generally middle to middle upper class. But it happens everywhere. Could be your neighbors and you don't even know it. Which is one of the reasons that we want to talk about these things, right? So if I'm able to get you 6 more aware of abuse and what it looks like, and you're able to look at the signs, maybe you can ask your friend who lives next door to you and say, you know, I've noticed a little bit of things are off with you and Sam. Can we talk about that? Do you need help? Can I do anything for you? You know that if he's doing A, B, C, and D, or if your grandson is doing A, B, C, and D, that's really not okay. And I can try and help you get connected to somebody who would help you with that situation. All right, so then going over types of abuse. We have the physical abuse, so use of physical force that may result in bodily injury or physical pain. Sexual abuse, again, non-consensual sexual contact. Emotional abuse, infliction of anguish, pain, or distress through verbal or nonverbal acts. Abandonment, this one I hear a lot from whoever is the caregiver saying, well, what are you going to do without me? If I leave you here, you're going to have to go to a nursing home. You want to be at your home, don't you? Those kind of things. Or I'm just going to drop you off at an assisted living facility. Abandonment. Financial exploitation, we've talked about that quite a bit already. Illegal or improper use of an elder's funds, property, or assets, and then neglect. So failure to fulfill any part of their caregiving. All right, reported abuse cases. And again, remember, these are only reported abuse cases. So 58.5% is neglect, 15.7% is physical, 17.3% is emotional, 0.4% is sexual abuse, 5.1% is all other, and 0.6% is unknown. What do you think that 12.3 is? Ding, ding, ding. Financial abuse. I would be willing to bet it's a heck of a lot higher than that because of all the other abuses that I see. This is always there. This isn't always there. This isn't always there. Emotional is mostly always there. Sexual abuse is definitely not always there. And neglect is not always there. But this is always there with all the clients I've worked with.
What do you do if it's financial exploitation? There's nothing you could really do.
Well, there is. It depends. It's a case-by-case basis. So if it's somebody that is financially abusing you, that's your power of attorney. It's revoking their rights of the power of attorney and then reporting their crimes that they have committed. The county has, Anoka County in particular, has been taking on a lot more cases of financial abuse and financial exploitation than they used to. People are becoming more knowledgeable about the subject and people are being criminally charged with it. And there's a difference between legal guardianship and power of attorneys and conservatorships. So again, that would be a case-by-case basis of depending on the person who is committing the crime. There's different routes that you can take legally to go about reconciling the financial abuse.
Because I just couldn't see how you could financially abuse in that situation.
And I haven't worked with any guardianship situations, power of attorney situations, and people who have absolutely no authority over monies, like grandson stealing grandma's checkbook and writing checks for $3,500, and then a year later, grandma noticing it. And banks noticing it. So banks are becoming more aware of it, which is a great thing. We work in tandem a lot with the Minnesota Elder Justice Center, and they're based out of St. Paul. And they're working a lot on trying to get out what financial abuse and what financial exploitation looks like. And one of the ways they're doing that is talking to the banks, talking to fiduciaries, talking to guardians, talking to the different people that would be handling monies of elders. So who commits abuse? We've talked about this a little bit. So what do you think the percent is of elder abuse that's committed by a family member? 90. So out of that percentage, how much of that is committed by adult children or spouses? 66. Grandchildren are a big one. So a caregiver is more likely to abuse if they are abusing drugs or alcohol. So they're not in their right mindset, not an excuse at all, but might be more likely to be abusive. Have a mental illness. I have a couple clients that have children or grandchildren with severe mental illness, whether that's schizophrenia, paranoid schizophrenia, bipolar. So people with mental illnesses are more likely to. And then feeling burdened by caregiving. So that caregiver burnout of if you're taking care of your spouse 24/7 and your spouse has dementia and your spouse gets rude to you, tells you you're fat, tells you you're worthless, throws things at you, becomes aggressive with you, like can often happen with dementia. And so then the caregiver gets burnt out and then becomes kind of abusive and aggressive back, pushing them to just sit down, withholding water so they don't have to get up to go to the bathroom, or just letting them lay in their own filth and not changing their depends or not bringing them to go to the bathroom, so they end up literally sticking to their bed in their own filth, which we've seen. The next section is, why do victims stay? Why would you think a victim might stay in a situation? They don't know what else to do. They don't know what's available. Good.
Don't have any money or financial.
That's a huge one. No money to get away. Anybody else?
They start to believe what the abuser has been telling them.
That's a big thing. Gaslighting, crazy making. Okay, he's telling me that all this stuff has happened. I don't remember it, but he's constantly saying all this stuff has happened. It must be true. I must just be crazy. And that happens at all ages of abuse. That happens from kids to everywhere. Yeah, once you're told you're stupid, you're worthless, you're told that a million times. Every day you hear it, even just once a day if you hear it. You're going to start believing that, so you're going to be like, okay, well, nobody else is going to love me. I might as well just be here. I'm worthless. So why don't the elderly report abuse? Fear of retaliation. So that fear of, well, if you report me, I'm putting you in a nursing home. Or if you report me, I'm going to hurt your pet. I'm going to hurt your dog. Or if you hurt me, or if you report me, I'm keeping your grandchildren away from you. I won't let you see them anymore. I see that a lot. Cognitive inability. So you don't know how to report, you don't know what's available to you, or you don't have the capacity to know that this is wrong. So that would be an instance as to why they don't report. Or don't want to get the abuser in trouble. So let's say your abuser is your grandson, and your grandson is the only family that you have left. Your grandson is your caregiver. So if you report, you get him in trouble, what family do you have left? That's troublesome, that's hard. You're not necessarily going to want to report that. And so when we work with individuals who are being abused, they don't want to report it. As long as they're not a vulnerable adult, we're not going to make them report it. If somebody if their spouse is abusing them and they want to stay in the relationship, they just need help getting through it, we're here to help them. So we're here whether you want to stay, whether you want to leave, whether you want to report or not. The only caveat to that is we are mandated reporters. So if there's vulnerable adult or child protective services needing to be involved, we will report. So elder abuse warning signs: bruises, pressure marks, broken bones, abrasions, unexplained withdrawal from normal activities. So if somebody really likes to knit, and normally they are knitting every single day, and then all of a sudden you notice that she's not bringing her knitting to book club anymore when she used to, or she's just not coming to book club anymore. That's a red flag. Sudden changes in financial situations may be the result of exploitation. So let's say Sally goes and gets her nails done every 2 weeks, and all of a sudden Sally's not getting her nails done every 2 weeks, and you're like, oh, your nails usually look so pretty. Are you not going anymore? And it's, oh, I don't have the money to. Well, why did you and now you don't? What changed? So that could be a red flag. Bed sores, unattended medical needs, poor hygiene, or unusual weight loss. So if all of a sudden you notice one of your friends has lost 20 pounds over the past month, that might be a red flag. It could also be medical reasons, but it could be a red flag. Belittling, threats, and other uses of power and control by caregiver. So if you are seeing another person belittling a friend of yours or a family member of yours in front of you, that's going to be happening a lot worse behind closed doors. So if somebody is willing to talk somebody down in front of you, they're much willing to do worse things behind closed doors. And then strained or tense relationships, frequent arguments, that kind of goes hand in hand with that. Talking about these things, we're going to talk about whether it's abuse or not. You financially support your adult child.
Everything depends on the situation.
Ding, 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 you guys caught on. These are trick questions. So you have a right to decide what you want to do with your own money. If you are helping financially support an adult child who is in a crisis or just got a divorce or needs help for whatever reasons and you just want to help, that's perfectly fine. However, if somebody is manipulating you by saying, if you don't help me with this, I'm going to do A, B, C, and D. I'm going to keep your grandkids away from you. I am not going to help bring you to church anymore. That would be a form of abuse, right? So your husband calls you names.
Yeah, it's when and where.
Oh, sweetie. Yeah. So if your husband is endearing and is constantly calling you honey or, those kind of things, those cute little pet names, obviously that's fine, right? But if somebody is putting you down and making you feel less worthy or stupid or belittling you or condescending you of, oh, you didn't go to college, I went to college, I know what I'm talking about, you don't, that kind of thing, that's abusive. Your caregiver puts her or his hands on you. Well, what if you kind of have a flirtatious relationship with your neighbor and you kind of like them? Oh, I thought that's a neighbor. Maybe I was looking at the wrong thing. Caregiver. Well, even so, if your caregiver is your spouse. I was looking at the next slide. It shows me my next slide here. Yeah, it depends, right? So if somebody is hurting you or touching you in an unwanted sexual way, abusive. But if it's welcomed, it's not abusive, right? Here's the neighbor one. Your neighbor makes sexual comments towards you. So you have the right to feel comfortable in your own home, in your own neighborhood. So as long as those sexual comments are wanted, fine. If they're not okay. You need to feel comfortable in your own home, in your own neighborhood, in your own community. You can't go out anymore. So you have the right to come and go as you please. However, if you're sick, if you're in hospice, sometimes you're not going to be able to go out anymore if you're in that situation. So again, situational, gray area, trick question. Now if somebody won't allow you to go out anymore, there's where we have the abuse. But you should have the right to go as you please and go where you want, when you please, with who you want. Your living space is a mess.
I often say that.
Don't go in my house. So if your living space is a mess, if you aren't able to clean up, you have the right to try and figure out how to get a caregiver in there or try to figure out how you can get the clutter out. If you already have a caregiver and your living space is a mess and one of your caregiver's duties is to help clean, so your caregiver tracks where you go. So if you can think back to that picture where that guy was looking through his maybe wife's phone. So sometimes people can track where you go through your phone. So that's not okay. Let's go through the signs and symptoms of elder abuse real quick. We went through a couple of them. But you'll see general signs of abuse, which we've kind of looked at some of these. So the physical abuse, we looked at some of those. Report of a drug overdose or apparent failure to take medication regularly. So if you hear one of your friends talking to you about how they're not able to get their meds every day, or that they accidentally took too much of their medication, maybe there's caregiver neglect going on, or maybe they're taking their own medications and they maybe need some medication management. Broken eyeglasses or frames. So if you're constantly walking around with broken eyeglasses or frames and your caregiver's not helping you, or your husband refuses to pay for another pair because he just doesn't want to, that's neglect. And we've kind of talked about this, caregivers' refusal to allow you to see the elder alone. So if you constantly want to talk, let's say you want to talk to her and her husband refuses to let you talk to her without him around, that's a red flag. Emotional abuse, so signs threatening, belittling, or controlling. We've talked about that. Behavior from the elder that mimics dementia, such as rocking, sucking, or mumbling to oneself. If you know that that individual does not have dementia or another type of impairment that would affect them like that, that could be a sign of abuse as well. Sexual abuse, you probably wouldn't see any of that unless a friend of yours was talking to you about it. That could be a red flag. Neglect by caregivers or self-neglect, so unusual weight loss like we talked about. If somebody complains about a bed sore that they might have, unsanitary living conditions, let's say you'll go over to her house and you notice she has not vacuumed in a long time, and you are seeing the dirt and the bed bugs or whatever it may be. Maybe there's some self-neglect going on there. Being left dirty or unbathed. Somebody's supposed to come in and bathe a friend of yours or a family member of yours and they're not, and you're able to tell that they haven't been bathed. Unsuitable clothing for the weather. So if you're noticing that Jimmy is going outside in shorts on our lovely Minnesota winter days, that could be a sign. Desertion of an elder in a public place. So mom decides to bring grandma over to Target and just leave her there in her wheelchair, and she's kind of just sitting there like all by herself. That could be a sign. So if you were out in public and you just happen to see somebody sitting by themselves, talk to them. Do you have a family member here? Do you have a friend here? What's going on? Financial exploitation. Elder, significant withdrawals from elder accounts, sudden changes in the elder's financial condition, items or cash missing, suspicious changes in wills, additions of names to a senior's signature card. If somebody has added themselves possibly as an authorized user as a credit card, unpaid bills or lack of medical care, financial activity the senior couldn't have done by themselves because they're bedridden. Unnecessary services, so if they are getting subscriptions to Car and Driver magazine and it is your 87-year-old mother who doesn't have any use for Car and Driver, wonder if her 16-year-old grandson is ordering that in her name. Healthcare fraud, so if you're helping a friend of yours with figuring out some medical bills and you're noticing duplicate billing for the same services, check in to see what's going on. It could be just a mistake, but it could also be some healthcare fraud. So look into those things. These are our brochures, and I usually have some stocked up here at the Fridley Senior Center up by Connie's office. So if you ever feel like you talk to a friend and you're noticing some of those signs and symptoms, even if you do something as small as just giving this to your friend in a safe place, that could make all the difference to them. So if you open up our brochure here, it kind of talks about who we are, what we do, but in the middle portion here, it talks about what might be abuse. So it goes through isolating you by keeping you from friends and family, controlling where you go by not providing transportation to your faith community or social groups, like the senior center here. Controlling what happens with your money or using your money for themselves. So kind of going through all the things that we just talked about there. So if you felt like a friend might be showing signs and symptoms, going through this with them and be like, is any of this happening? Because I feel like I might have seen or heard you talk about some of these things that sound similar to what's in this pamphlet. Maybe you should give Megan a call over at the Alexandra House. And my number is on the back of these brochures. And then if you guys want my card, I can also give you that as well. But I'm the aging services coordinator on there. That's my desk phone. So if you guys ever want to give that out as a reference, you can, or if you ever need it for yourselves. Working with somebody in aging services at the Alexandra House, all of our services at the Alexandra House, no matter how old you are or what program you're working with, are all free. Working with us consists of, we usually do an intake meeting that lasts about an hour and a half to 2 hours. And then from there on, we work with our clients about every 2 weeks, and we work towards goals, whether that is helping to find housing, helping to get on medical assistance, helping to get on elderly waivers, a lot of the same type of things that Chris does, except for I only do it in a domestic violence or sexual violence or financial exploitation situation. Helping report to the police officers if there is that financial exploitation, assisting you if your grandson was your abuser and your grandson broke windows in your home, helping you try to figure out how to get those fixed. If somebody destroyed the plumbing in your home on purpose, trying to help get those things fixed. If you are needing an order for protection, if you have that pesky neighbor who is harassing you and constantly making sexual comments towards you, trying to get a harassment restraining order filed. So our services look kind of different, case by case basis, as we've kind of talked about. There's so many gray areas, so your needs kind of depend on how we tailor our case work with you guys, but it's always free.